So as we are going to assemble the panel here for the Q&A, if everyone could take a moment and write a question down on their index card that they might have. Where's my Psych Club helpers? Are you guys still here? So if we can maybe get someone in each aisle, you guys can pass your index cards to the sides. And in the meantime, I'll call up the students, Joe, Lynette, Yvette, if you're here, Ryan, and Dr. Caleb as well. And if each of you guys could take a seat. All right, so as you guys, I see writing, which is excellent. Excellent, excellent. So if you guys want to pass your questions to the sides, we have Elise coming up and down here. You can kind of hold it up too so that she sees it. And then we have Kylie over here. Anyone who has questions on that side? All right, so as people are writing, I'm going to kick it off a little bit. I hope that what you saw in the documentary could just be the start of a conversation that we have about mental health, and I hope that after this program, everyone in here can continue conversations. I think the more we talk openly about mental health, that's what erases stigma about it. So we have two of the individuals who were interviewed. We have Joe here and Lynette here. And so I know that this was video recorded in the fall of 2016. So I wanted to give each of you an opportunity, if you like, to give us a little update on how things have been going for you since then. So Joe, I don't know if you want to start first, and you guys will need to raise your hand so that they could turn on your mic.
I'm Joe. Since the last time that you guys saw me when it was filmed and everything, things have been busy. I have developed a personal mission statement, which is to serve the mental health community and the community in general to the best of my ability. I have become the president of our local NAMI chapter, National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I'm also regional co-chair for our Northeast Region CSB chapter, which serves 18 counties. But also, since this conversation we had, I had to have a hip replacement because of medications I was taking that killed the blood vessels going into my hip, and my hip compressed on itself, so I had to have it replaced. And since that time frame, I have not been able to go see a doctor. The voices in my head, the things that they're telling me in my leg, and things like that are holding me back. Fear is what it is. My audio, visual, and tactile hallucinations add to that fear. Over the last, I would say, 8 months, I've been able to go to my hip doctor, give them 4-leaf clovers, ask them to sit down and talk to me. I was able to have an hour-and-a-half conversation with the entire team in that doctor's office and explain to them what's going on with me. After that, I wrote up thank you cards for them spending the time, but I haven't had the courage to go and deliver them yet. And I haven't had the courage to go to my family doctor yet. And that's just something I'm dealing with and working hard, and I will get there, and I'll be able to see my doctors and things like that. But just because I have gratitude and just because I serve the community doesn't mean I'm not struggling with my mental illness. And we'll figure it out. We'll get there together. And honestly, all of you guys sitting in this room are going to help me push further than that. So thank you.
since the interview, I have not had any changes in my mental illness. At the time of the interview, I was 20 years into remission from it, and I continue to be. You do not get over a mental illness. In my opinion, you just go into remission and try to stay there. However, I have had a lot of personal hardship happen to me just this past year, that if I was not still in therapy, was not still compliant with my medication, probably would have triggered a total relapse. My home burned to the ground in July, so I lost everything. My son also seems to have possibly inherited my mental illness. So I am separated from my husband and my son now, living on my own, trying to rebuild life, and but I'm doing well. I'm doing well, considering everything that's happened. If anything, I'm stronger. I do have times when I think, gee, am I getting a little bit sad? Am I getting a little bit too depressed? But it's always about normal things. Well, you know, obviously, house fire, I'm pretty sad about it. So I'm keeping it in check, keeping up with my therapy, my medications, and just going forward.
So for Joe and Lynette, before we go over to the students, what was it like to tell your story to a complete stranger? Sorry about that. I set it up that way, so that's kind of how it worked. But what did that feel like for you?
For me, it was just part of life. I share my story worldwide. I am not afraid to tell people my story. I believe that my story helps others understand that they're not alone, or that even if they're not dealing with a mental illness, that all of us have hope. So when I was asked to be part of this discussion, I was excited because that was just another step in sharing my story with others.
Lynette, how about for you?
It wasn't difficult at all. I'm also not ashamed of it. Something that happened to me, something I worked hard to get over with. I do share the story with people I meet in conversation when the conversation seems to be leaning that way, and it's surprising how many people say, I went through that too. I understand that. I did that. My sister has that, so it wasn't hard at all.
So for our 4 students who were here, there were 6 students that were shown in this video. One transferred to another school and one graduated. But the 4 students who are here, so we have Ian, if you want to give a little wave, Sarah, who's there, Kiara, and Faith. So someone asked a question, how did this project affect you? And I'll sort of add on to that, what was it like for you to interview a complete stranger? And I think all of you guys were first-year students. Like, welcome to Misericordia, Intro to Psych, University Writing Seminar. Please go interview a complete stranger. So what was it like for you?
So I feel like before we did this project, everybody that at least I knew threw around mental health disorders like it was kind of nothing. If you didn't get into one of your classes you try to get into, you're like, oh, I'm depressed. Or like someone was being moody and they're like, oh, they're bipolar. But like you don't necessarily realize what that diagnosis is and what those people go through on a daily basis. And this can happen to anyone at any point in time, and like you don't realize the people that you walk by on the street and everyone that you come into contact with, what they're going through all the time. So I think it was eye-opening that you could have seen any of these people at the grocery store and you would have no idea what they're dealing with 24/7. And it sort of opened my eyes to be more aware and be more empathetic to everyone in general.
Oh, anyone else?
I would just say, like, going off of what Faith said, like, it was very, definitely very eye-opening, because you really don't know what anyone's going through. And then doing it, like, as a first year, like, coming into Misericordia, it was definitely, like, a big thing, because I think I never, like, really thought about mental illness too much, like, beforehand. Like, it was always just, like, oh, I knew it existed, but, like, I never realized how much of an impact it would have. And then that's, like, doing a project like this and then going, like, through the rest of college, like, was definitely, like, it helps prepare me for that. So, like,
Sarah, Ian, anything to add?
I mean, I learned a lot from this experience. Just, I mean, like Faith said, and like you don't know what someone's going through, like from day to day. It's to just be aware of that, and just to hear Lynette's story, it was really eye-opening too. And just, I mean, like mental health continues. Like there's still some progress, but still, like there's still some stigmas attached. So.
Going into like the interview, I was beyond scared. I was thinking of like every movie I've ever seen with mental illnesses. I'm like, what if they do something? I'm going through every scenario that could happen. And I get there, I'm finally there, and she was so normal, and she made me feel so comfortable when I thought I was going to be doing that to her. And it made me mad that I even went in there feeling like I had to imagine all these scenarios where I would have to do something out of the regular. It made me mad that all these movies, all these years of my life, my mind was molded to think that they're unpredictable, they're gonna do something, when really they said it, they're so normal. You can run into them every day of your life, and you might not know, you might know, but you shouldn't carry around these stigmas with you that they're like that.
So part of, so the students did these interviews, and then the second part of the project was for them to write a memoir about the life of the person that they interviewed as if the student were the person. And so that's where Dr. Caleb's expertise came in to help give some different options about how are you going to now present this person's story. So first I want to ask the students, what was that phase of the project like, having to capture and write the story that you were then told? How did that feel, and how did you figure out how to do that?
Like before the interview started, I asked her if I could voice record, everything on my iPhone, just because I knew I had to write all this. I had my notepad with me, I was taking notes, and while I was writing it, I would just keep listening to that recording over and over again. You try to listen for like the tone of their voice, hear maybe a quiver, but I tried listening to over and over again just so I got their exact story and not some story that I was making up for them.
it felt like a big responsibility, like having the opportunity to tell someone's story, because you don't want to make it up or like put your own spin on it or like anything. Like you want to have it exactly as they're telling the story, which like I thought was really interesting. And like the same thing, I had to record the whole interview and then listen to it and transcribe it all to like make sure I was getting everything like exactly done. And then I sent it to my interviewee and I was like, let me know if there's anything like you want to change or if I like didn't capture something right. And she gave a lot of feedback too, which I thought was really good and it helped a lot.
I feel like it sort of turned my sympathy to empathy, and I heard her story and heard everything she said, and I had sympathy and I felt bad, and I was like, I can't imagine living that on a daily basis. And then as I was putting myself in the shoes and writing the story, like it really resonated with me that she wakes up every day, and every hour that she's awake, she is constantly dealing with something, and that is so many people. And you really have to put yourself in those shoes and understand what it's like for those people, and it's really hard.
Yeah, I felt like it was difficult to just start out and try to portray the story in the right way. And I just tried to listen also the voice recording over and over again just to make sure I got everything right and, made sure my words it all made sense.
Dr. Caleb, do you want to chime in about, we worked together in the beginning of the semester about what you remember noticing or from your perspective, what was it like to help the students through that part of the process?
In case you didn't know. Wow. So when Dr. Nordstrom approached, if I can go back a little bit earlier, when Dr. Nordstrom approached me about joining in, I was super excited. I was not here for the first Voices project. I wasn't faculty here yet. I had seen the second Voices project, and to be involved in the third one was amazing. And then I realized, oh wow, this is going to be tricky in a university writing seminar. Those of you who've taken it, you know what that's like. And to have all these mostly first-year students and say, welcome to college, you're going to write 6 papers in this class anyway, but by the way, one of them is going to be a really emotionally challenging paper. I saw the fear in their eyes when we first introduced it, I think in the second day of the semester. Ryan's nodding down there. They looked scared. It was deer in headlight. And so to see from that moment of fear and the emails we got about, what if I don't do it right? What if I don't capture everything right? What if I miss this? I recorded it, but I don't think I got, we had tons of emails that came in, and going through the writing process, seeing the confidence that our students developed, not just in their writing, but in the idea of embodying someone else's voice. I think Faith put it so beautifully, that movement from sympathy to empathy. We really saw that. You know, we're reading a bunch of texts that are dealing with mental health. We read a graphic novel, and to see their analysis there and then move into this moment of empathy and embodying someone else's voice, I thought it was tremendous. I really felt at the end of that semester exhausted, but in such a good way, because I'd seen such wonderful development from the students. So yeah, I couldn't be prouder, honestly.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What novel did you read?
Psychiatric Tales. Yeah, I have it in my office. I can bring it down.
And I'll say that I don't know if I've ever seen students take an assignment so seriously that, because there were 50 people interviewed, and I remember one student interviewed a woman whose son committed suicide. And I remember the look in his face, and he said, I don't know if you remember this, he said, I have to get this right. And he didn't mean for the grade, he meant for the person. So there was such ownership, and I think, Dr. Caleb, I speak for you as well, that we were so impressed by how serious the students approached this as a personal responsibility. So to Lynette and Joe, what is it like to not just share, but turn your story over to someone else and have them speak for you and capture that?
Well, for me, honestly, it was scary. That was a lot more scary than me telling my story, because I did not expect somebody to be able to capture it. I expected them to put their personal judges in, their prejudices, their stigmas, what mental illness is, what schizoaffective is, what schizophrenia is, what hallucinations are. I expected them to put what they thought about it into it. And the student that transferred to a different school is the student that interviewed me. And when she wrote up my story and sent it to me, I got it, and I understood that she understood. And the gentleman that played me on the stage up here, he understood what I meant by gratitude. He felt that. And I can't ask for anything more than that expression that was given by the students and the people that portrayed my story. And all that fear went away, and it was just good.
Lynette, how about for you?
I have not read the memoir, so I'm at a little bit of a loss. I guess I could get a copy of that?
Yes,
Somehow?
absolutely.
Okay, that would be
We'll
great.
hook you up.
However, while I was speaking to Sarah, I could tell by her face. I could just tell in her face she was going to hold the story kindly in her hands and write it that way too.
So Ryan Wood was one of the filmmakers who was here, and the students know, I don't know if anyone else knows, they were on campus, the filmmakers, probably 7 days total or 8 days total, and they were in the classroom, they were in the interviews, and it might have even been more, like 10. We were hanging out quite a lot. And so there's probably what, Ryan, like 40 hours of footage.
Would say probably safe to say it was between 50 and 100 hours, honestly, of footage. And you know, with 40 of it being actual usable content. But yeah, something like that.
So what you guys are seeing is 30 minutes of like that much footage. So Ryan, from your perspective, one, because you film a wide variety of things. So what did you learn from mental health about this? And what was it like for you to then be the ultimate gatekeeper of these stories and put them together?
I just want to echo the sentiments of all the students that it felt like a tremendous amount of responsibility that Todd and I took extremely seriously. I think the most difficult part of the process was actually editing. You know, you guys had the hard part while we were filming. We were really just there as flies on the wall, kind of capturing whatever you did with it. And then for us to go back to the editing room and craft those stories and remain authentic to them, but also make them feel like a completed story with almost a beginning, middle, and end that was universal in its appeal, but also specific in its information, was very difficult. And that was without a doubt the part that took us the longest. But you know, it pales in comparison to the bravery of Joe and Lynette to come and you know, hand over their stories to 4 students and 2 wannabe filmmakers, and trust us to even come close to doing them justice. So thank you both for being here and for that bravery. I also want to direct everybody's attention to Alicia Nordstrom, because none of this would happen without her guidance and wisdom and leadership. So thank you, Dr. Nordstrom, for doing it. I don't have any idea if I answered your question, but.
Can I just say something on that? You know, I had the opportunity to sit down and watch the documentary when it was first released, so to speak, not released, but I had an opportunity to view it. And I was interviewed for quite some time. And what I was on the screen there was maybe 6 minutes, I'm guessing. But you captured my whole story in that 6 minutes that you edited out. And I just want to say thank you for that, because I don't think you missed anything.
Thank you, thank you.
So we have a question from the audience. What's the hardest part about having a mental health condition? So this would be to Joe or Lynette.
I'll go with it. Hardest part for me, I was 35 when I was diagnosed. I had a full-time job. I had 2 cars, new house, whole family, kids, all of it. When I got diagnosed, all of that went away. I didn't know what was going on with me. Nobody else knew what was going on with me. And it just evaporated. All of it did. And that's the hardest part for me. My job, my identity was my job. That was the hardest part for me. But it also was the most exciting part for me after I got in the recovery side of things, because I got to redefine who I was. And I'm looking out there to the audience, and we got a lot of young people, and we got some older people sitting in this audience too. And I would just like to ask each and every one of you guys, have you ever experienced who you are? True, wholeheartedly, who you are. What you stood for, what you'll believe in, what you'll fight for, what you won't fight for. Because I was a chameleon. I was who you wanted me to be. And this whole journey that I've been on showed me who I am. And there is nothing that I can say is more powerful than that as a human being, to understand us as an individual, to understand us. So it was hard because I lost an awful lot, but it was a blessing because I gained so much more.
I think the hardest part for me is the guilt I still carry around, which I'm not supposed to be carrying around, according to every single therapist and doctor I've ever seen. However, it still bothers me. It bothers to think back on the way I acted, the things I neglected, the burden I put on other people, all of that. I wish I could make amends for a lot of the things that happened, and I do try. I'm trying in a larger sense too. I was a good person before it happened, but now I try to be a better person. Just try to be a little bit kinder, a little bit more patient, a little bit more tolerant with the world in general.
So I was asked, someone asked a question about how did I decide on the mental health conditions that were included in this project? And my background is clinical psychology, so I use the criteria that if it is in the DSM-5, which is a huge book, my students have seen it now, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, then it is considered a, quote, mental disorder. But part of the Voices Project is to challenge some of the definitions we have of what is a mental disorder, what is a physical disorder, what is a disability in general, whether the disability is physical or mental health-based. So one thing that I have thought about is the usage of terms, and I know Dr. Caleb teaches about this a lot. So I call it a mental health condition, so I don't like disorder, I don't like disease, because I feel like I wish I could just call it an experience, like a mental health experience, a physical experience, because like that just the words put a negative judgment into it, when I would argue that even though Joe and Lynette, like I asked you that question, but I could ask anyone that question, because tons of us in this room have mental health conditions. It's part of the human experience to have them, just like having a physical condition is part of the human experience. So I think that's how stigma is going to be erased if we just, I mentioned it here in the movie, if we just see mental health as part of ourselves, like I have mental health, I have physical health, I have a personality, I have intelligence, I have all these different characteristics. But to answer the question, if it was in that DSM book, I put it in the project, and there were more conditions than were shown here. Autism, ADHD, alcoholism. There was a lot more that was not just here in this shown in the video too. So. One question to the students is, what did you learn or what did you take away from this project, and or how did it change you? There were some questions about that.
I don't know. It made me think. I know nothing about this person, and treat people how you want to be treated. Be nice to them. Be polite. Don't be rude. Interrupt them. Listen. Actually, listen to them. Don't just hear them. Think about what they're saying to you. And I don't know. Just be tolerant of them, like she said. Thank you.
I think doing this project kind of just helped to grow my awareness of anything that could be happening around me or anything that anyone else is going through, because I'd tend to just be in my own little world, focused on what I'm doing, and then just how I can help. But this helped to realize okay, this person is going through this and I could have no idea. So just to have that awareness of anything else that's happening.
I agree. I think it sort of just gave me more of an awareness of everyone around me, and that everyone has a story and everybody has stuff that they're going through on a daily basis, whether it is severe as some of these things or someone's just having a bad day. You don't know that, and that's what everybody's dealing with on a daily basis, and just sort of being aware of everyone that you come into contact with and just how little things can mean so much to someone, and just like always being kind to people is important.
So for each of the panelists, and you're each going to come at this from different perspectives, how would you recommend or how would you suggest that people think about mental health conditions?
I'd just like you to think about mental health conditions as it's just every one of us. I mean, what the statistics show, 1 in 4. And if that's accurate, then everyone that's sitting in this room knows somebody. And it could be a mother, a father, a grandmother, crazy Uncle Charlie in the back room. I mean, we all had one of those at one point. But it's just, we're all just part of this room. We're all just part of the human condition. You know, we're here. We're not here to hurt anybody. We deal with stuff. But all of us deal with stuff. I mean, there's not a moment that goes by where we're not, you know. We're not dealing with something in one way or shape or form. You know, I tease my daughter now. I say my daughter, she's not officially yet. Maybe down the road she will be. But she cries over a leaf falling on the ground. And it's not a bad thing. She feels for that leaf. And it's just not a bad thing. And that's okay, you know. It's just all okay. We can be ourselves. No matter what we're dealing with, we can still be ourselves.
One, I want to say that was so eloquent. I'm really enjoying being up here and just the eloquence of what everyone is saying as an English person in particular. But I think of it, I guess I'm going to come at it a little more from sort of the English professor perspective for a minute. I think of it linguistically, and I'm thinking of it in terms of narrative. And some of you have heard me say this, so apologies, but it bears saying again, is how we use language to describe people. The difference between saying schizophrenic and a person with schizophrenia is such a different way of viewing any type of condition, but particularly a mental health condition. And I think getting us to think about the person before the condition is just eye-opening. Yeah, it's a few more words, but what a difference it makes to the individual and to your perspective. And I think the more we can kind of change that linguistically, that's a small change that I think can make a big difference. But I also think of the storytelling and the narrative. I think we're very me-centered. That's kind of human nature to some extent, is that we see from our own perspective. It's very hard to get into someone else's perspective. And I think the importance of removing the I sometimes, and really thinking, where is this person coming from? How are they seeing the world? And the validity of seeing the world differently than I see the world. I say this as someone, my dad has vascular dementia. Having conversations with him can be very difficult from my perspective. You know, I'm saying, why isn't this more linear? Or why are you not remembering? And to come out of that position for a minute and to say, but how is he seeing the world? And how does he make sense of the world? And how important it is that he has autonomy and dignity in that. I think understanding storytelling, gaining the empathy, that's just a game changer. And more of us to think of not ourselves first, but others, and respecting different positions, that'll change. That'll change stigma.
Oh, you're good? Ian?
You just have to just be respectful of everyone and treat everyone on the same wavelength of you, because not only does your actions speak volumes, but also your words too, like everyone was saying. So just be in your awareness also.
Going off of like what Sarah just said, like, yeah, I think just like being kind to everyone and like being aware that they like could be going through something. Like everyone has mental health, so everyone's going through like something, or like, even if you're doing like really good, like at some point, like you have a bad day, you have something. So like using that kind of perspective to be able to put yourself into the shoes of someone else and think about what they might be going through and things like that.
I think sort of my goal for like the community and society as a whole is to just eventually do our best to get rid of the stigma. That's nothing you can control. That's something that you have to then, that sort of shapes your life and you have to deal with, but that you shouldn't have to feel bad about that. You shouldn't have to be looked at differently for having a mental health condition, and there shouldn't be a stigma to it.
I'm actually going to take a slightly different perspective on this. I think that this generation, which is like, I'm the oldest member and you guys are some of the youngest members, our generation in particular, I think more than any other previous generation, might be more familiar specifically with anxiety and depression than any previous generation. So I think that you guys actually have a better perspective on this than maybe even you think you do. That you may be going through something and you don't have a definition for it yet, but you might be experiencing it, or your roommate might be, or your friend might be. And you already know this. You know it based on how they're acting. You know it based on the social situations that you're growing up in right now. It's a stressful world to live up in, or to grow up in right now. And I think if there's any generation that can end that stigma, it's our generation, it's your generation, because you're already kind of in it and living it, maybe perhaps more than any generation previously. So I think it ends here. You know, I think going forward, our kids are going to have a better understanding than maybe our parents did and maybe their parents did. So let's just keep the ball rolling forward and chip away at it a little bit at a time, and hopefully we can all, you know, grow to just understand each other a little better and be a little more accepting of all of our own situations.
I would just like to touch on something you said with, say the word, logistics.
Linguistically.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I do support meetings throughout the VA and the community and things like that, and one word just like catches me, and it happened today, right? Where somebody says, I suffer with, or a family member would say, they suffer with. Well, just using that word itself means we are actually suffering. And if we can just change one word in our thought process, we are no longer suffering with. We're dealing with it, we're handling it, we're going forward, we're moving forward, and we're not stuck behind. And, you know, and just what you had to say just popped that in my head, so I apologize for taking the time.
Yeah, Lynette?
I would just wanted to add to something to this also. It seems like there's such a really big stigma. However, in my experience, the change is coming actually kind of more rapidly than I would expect. When I was first diagnosed, my own mother, even though she was right by my side, helping me, everything, said, Lynette, don't tell anybody. Don't talk about it. Don't tell anybody about this. And I was like, why? Why? It's happening. There's no shame in this. But she said, no, don't let people know. So I was open-minded about it, and I talked about it, much to her dismay. And now your generation talks about it all the time. It's great. You know buzzwords, you know what's going on. It's just not a deep, dark secret anymore. It's really out there in the open. It feels really good. It feels really good for me.
So I'll end with two cards here. One says, how could I help? And the other says, what do you think a world without stigma looks like? And I think it looks like this room. So I think it looks like college students from the rising generation who are going to become the leaders in healthcare and education and engineering, and you're going to lead our world. So it looks like you guys picking up sort of the message and running with it. So the message of let's talk about it, the message of don't be ashamed, the message of own it because it's part of who we are. That's what a world without stigma looks like. And whether it's mental health or physical or race or religion or whatever that is, the more open we are, the more we send the message that it's okay to talk about it, because secrecy breeds shame, which is what reinforces that idea. So I thank you all for being here, and I hope that you could start conversations in the worlds where you live in and walk around in, and this could be the start of a conversation of mental health, not the end. Oh, thank you. Just a few logistical things. Kay Fairley, who was the woman who lost her husband to Alzheimer's, couldn't make it tonight, but she wanted everyone to know that there is an Alzheimer's support group at 10 o'clock a.m. once a week at right across the street at the Meadows. So if anyone is interested or knows someone who would benefit from that, she wanted you to know that the supports are out there for that. I also wanted to thank the Psychology Club and NAMI for having tables. So please, as you're exiting, feel free to take literature and feel free to hit up the Psych Club because they're looking for new members out there as well. If you want the link to this video or any of the resources for the Voices Project, it is on our psychology department website, or feel free to email me. So thank you so much. Oh, yes.
Say one last thing. Talk to each other, please. Not only if you're feeling bad, tell somebody, I'm not feeling right, but if you see somebody, even if it's a stranger, or say, are you okay? I ask people that all the time.
Grocery stores, best
Yeah,
place.
grocery stores. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes they are. But maybe it only takes that one person asking and then telling your story a little bit, or say, hey, I went through this. I know what you can do.
You never know whose lives you might touch by doing
Right.
that. Can we have a round of applause for our panel here? Thank you all so much for coming. Have a good night.